I am 60 years old, and I have learned that the most dangerous sentences in life are the ones that start with "it's just," because they are almost never just anything. It's just for a little while, Mom. It's just the guest room. It's not like you're losing the house. It's just easier this way, with the baby coming. My name is Margaret Colby. Everyone who has ever loved me calls me Meg, though by the end of the story I'm about to tell you, my son had stopped calling me much of anything at all. I lived, I should say, though I'll get to that, in a 4-bedroom brick colonial on Larkspur Lane in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. My late husband, Ray, and I bought that house in 1994, when our son Tyler was 6 years old, and our mortgage payment made us break out in a cold sweat every single month for the first 3 years. We painted every room ourselves. Ray built the deck off the kitchen with his own hands over 2 summers, cursing at the level every single afternoon. I planted the rose bushes along the front walk the year Tyler started middle school, and I have deadheaded them every June since. 28 years running. Ray died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless, 11 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. I won't dwell on it, except to say that grief reorganizes a person's priorities in ways that are hard to explain to people who haven't lived through it. After Ray died, the house stopped being a house and became something closer to a shrine, not in a morbid way, but in the sense that every room held him. The kitchen where he burned toast every Sunday for 30 years, the garage where his tools still hung on the pegboard exactly where he'd left them. The master bedroom where I still slept on my side of the bed, 26 inches from the empty space where he used to be. Tyler is my only child. I raised him largely on my own in the practical sense, because Ray worked long hours as a plant supervisor, and I was the one home for homework and fevers and heartbreaks. But Ray was there every evening and every weekend, present in the way that mattered. Tyler grew into a decent man, or so I believed for most of his adult life. He became an accountant, married a sweet if somewhat reserved young woman named Ashley, and settled 40 minutes away in a starter home that, by his own frequent complaints, felt cramped and outdated. 18 months ago, Ashley got pregnant. I was thrilled, genuinely uncomplicatedly thrilled, in a way that surprised even me given how much of my joy had gone quiet since Ray died. A grandchild felt like a light switching back on in a house that had been dim for years. I started knitting before they'd even announced it publicly. I cried actual tears of happiness in my car in the Target parking lot after buying my first pack of newborn onesies. Around the same time, Tyler and Ashley began, gently at first, floating the idea that their starter home wasn't going to work for a family of 3. Real estate in our area had gotten expensive, the kind of expensive that makes young families feel trapped no matter how responsibly they've saved. Tyler mentioned, almost in passing over a Sunday dinner, that they were thinking about their options. "You know, Mom," he said, twirling pasta around his fork, not quite looking at me, "this house is huge for just you. 4 bedrooms. You use, 2 of them?" I laughed it off at the time. "I use 3, Tyler. I sleep in 1. Grandma Colby's old sewing machine is in the 2nd, and the 3rd is where I keep every box of your Little League trophies you refuse to take with you." He laughed too. And the conversation moved on, and I genuinely thought that was the end of it. A passing comment, the kind families make and forget. It was not the end of it. Over the following months, the comments became more frequent and less passing. Ashley started mentioning nursery Pinterest boards during dinner, casually, the way you'd mention the weather, except every single board seemed to feature a large sun-drenched room with big windows. A room that, I began to realize with a slow, sinking feeling, bore a striking resemblance to my house's primary guest room. The one with the bay window facing the rose bushes, the one Ray and I had always called the good room, because it got the best light in the whole house, and we'd always planned to eventually convert it into a proper library once we retired, a plan cut short by a diagnosis neither of us saw coming. I told myself I was imagining a pattern where there wasn't one. I have a habit, I've since realized, of doing that, extending people the benefit of the doubt long after the doubt has stopped being reasonable. It is, I think, a particular occupational hazard of being a mother. You spend so many decades believing the best about your child by default that you lose the instinct to question it, even when the evidence piles up right in front of you. The pattern became impossible to ignore on a Sunday afternoon in April, 6 weeks before Ashley's due date. Tyler and Ashley came for dinner, as they did most Sundays. Ashley, now 7 months pregnant, and glowing in the particular way pregnant women glow when they're finally through the exhausting first trimester and haven't yet reached the exhausting final stretch. We ate at my kitchen table, the same table. Again, where I'd fed Tyler 1,000 breakfasts before school, and the conversation was pleasant enough until dessert, when Tyler set down his fork with the particular deliberateness of a man who has rehearsed what he's about to say. "Mom, Ashley and I wanted to talk to you about something," he said. "About the house." "What about the house?" "Well, we've been thinking, with the baby coming, and honestly, with how tight things are for us right now, financially, we were hoping maybe you'd consider us moving in here with you, just temporarily, to save up, get back on our feet before we buy something bigger for real." I felt something loosen in my chest, relief, actually, at first. The house had felt too big and too quiet since Ray died. The idea of it filling back up with life, with a baby's cry echoing down the hallway, sounded in that first unguarded moment like something close to a gift. "I'd love that," I said. And I meant it completely. "Of course, we'll figure out the details, but yes, absolutely, Tyler." Ashley smiled, and Tyler reached over and squeezed my hand, and for about 90 seconds. That Sunday afternoon felt like one of the happiest moments of my life since Ray had died. Then Tyler said the next part. "Great. So, we were thinking, the baby's going to need the big room, the one with the bay window with the good light, for the nursery. So you'd move into the guest room down the hall. It's smallest, but it's got its own bathroom. It'll be totally comfortable." Ashley's mom actually helped us pick out a crib already. We were thinking we could set it up in there next month, before the baby comes, just to get ahead of things. I sat very still. "You want me to move out of my bedroom," I said slowly, "into the guest room, in my own house?" "It's just for a little while," Mom said. And there it was, the sentence, the one I now know to fear more than almost any other. Once we save up and buy our own place, everything goes back to normal. It just makes more sense for the baby to have the good room, right? The light, the space. It's not like you're losing the house, you'll still be here. I looked at Ashley, who was suddenly very interested in the pattern on her dessert plate, offering no help, no pushback, no acknowledgement that what was being asked of me, inside my own home, in the bedroom I had shared with my late husband for 30 years. The room where I still slept on my side of a bed that used to hold 2 people, was, at minimum, a conversation that deserved more care than a Sunday dessert aside. "I need to think about that," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "Mom, come on. It's just a room. It's just a room," as if the room hadn't been the last place I'd held my husband's hand every night for 3 decades, as if the room hadn't been where he told me, 2 weeks before he died. Sitting up against those same pillows, that he wasn't afraid of dying, only afraid of leaving me in a house too big and too quiet for one person. As if the room were nothing more than square footage and light exposure. Rather than the single most sacred physical space left of my entire marriage, I did not argue that night. I nodded, said I needed time, and cleared the dessert plates with hands that were not quite steady. Tyler and Ashley left around 8. Tyler kissing my cheek at the door, telling me not to overthink it, that it would all work out fine. I stood in my kitchen after they left. In the house, Ray built the deck onto with his own 2 hands, and I understood. With a clarity that arrived far too late in the evening to be comfortable. That my son had just asked me to give up the last physical space that still belonged fully and completely to my marriage, and he had framed it as a favor I should be grateful to provide. I did not sleep well that night. I lay in my bed, my actual bed, in my actual room, for what I did not yet know would be one of the last nights I would spend viewing it as entirely, unquestionably mine, and I stared at the ceiling and thought about Ray, and about Tyler as a little boy who used to crawl into this same bed during thunderstorms, certain that nothing bad could reach him as long as he was between his parents. Somewhere around 2 a.m. staring at that ceiling, I made a decision. I didn't know yet exactly what shape it would take. But I knew, with the same cold clarity I imagine soldiers describe before a difficult but necessary action, that I was not going to spend the remainder of my life shrinking, room by room, inside the very walls I had built my entire adult life within, simply because my son had decided my needs were now negotiable and his were not. I did not say no to Tyler the next morning. I want to be honest about that, because the version of this story that would be easiest to tell is the one where I stood my ground immediately, drew a hard line, and refused. That is not what happened. What happened was slower, and in some ways more honest, because it gave me time to actually understand what I was dealing with before I reacted to it. I called my sister-in-law, Diane, Ray's younger sister, sharp as a tack. Retired family law paralegal, the person in my life who has never once in 30 years told me what I wanted to hear instead of what was true. I told her everything, the Pinterest boards, the Sunday dinner, the phrase, "it's just a room." Diane was quiet for a long moment on the phone. Then she asked the question that changed the direction of everything that followed. Meg, she said, whose name is on the deed? Mine, I said. Well, mine and Ray's originally. But after he passed, it transferred fully to me. I'm the sole owner. Does Tyler know that? I mean, know it specifically, not just assume it, actually know it. I thought about it, I don't know. I suppose he's always just assumed the house would eventually be his. We never really discussed it in detail. Right, Diane said. So he's not asking you to share a house you both have a claim to. He's asking you to relocate within a house that is entirely legally 100% yours, so that his family can use the best room in it. And he framed that as your favor to him. Put that plainly, out loud. By someone who wasn't emotionally entangled in it, the whole arrangement suddenly looked very different than it had at my kitchen table. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something I had genuinely never done in 28 years of living in that house. I began quietly researching what it was actually worth and what my actual options were. I called a realtor, Pam Nguyen, a brisk, kind woman recommended by a friend from my book club, and asked her to come do a casual, no-obligation walkthrough. I told her I was just curious about market value. She walked every room with a practiced eye, made notes on her tablet, and at the end, standing in my kitchen, told me something that nearly made me sit down. Margaret, with the market the way it is right now, and given the condition you've kept this place in, the updated kitchen, the finished basement, that gorgeous deck, I think you could list this at $415,000 and have a bidding war within a week, maybe 2 weeks, tops, to close. I had genuinely had no idea. I had bought that house for $142,000 in 1994. I had never once, in 28 years, thought of it primarily as an asset. It was just home, but hearing that number out loud did something to me. It reminded me, in very concrete terms, that this house was not an inevitability that belonged to my son by some unspoken family law. It was mine, fully, to do with as I chose. I did not decide, in that moment, to sell it. I want to be clear about the sequence of events, because I think it matters. I was not plotting revenge. I was simply, for the first time in a long time, gathering real information instead of operating purely on assumption and guilt. Over the following weeks, I watched my son and daughter-in-law with new eyes. The following Sunday, Ashley arrived with paint swatches, soft yellows and sage greens, and held them up against the walls of the good room, without asking me, murmuring to Tyler about which one would look best with the crib. I stood in the doorway of what was, at that moment, still my bedroom, and watched 2 adults discuss redecorating it. As though I were a tenant, they were kindly informing of upcoming renovations, not the owner whose consent had not actually, formally, ever been given. We were thinking maybe you could start moving things into the guest room this week. Tyler said to me on his way out that evening, phrased not quite as a question. Just so we have time to get the nursery set up before the baby comes. We're kind of on a tight timeline. I haven't agreed to anything yet, Tyler, I said, as gently as I could manage. He looked genuinely surprised. Mom, I thought we talked about this already. You told me what you wanted. I told you I needed to think about it. Those aren't the same thing. A flicker of something crossed his face, irritation, I think, though he tried to smooth it over quickly. I just don't get what there is to think about. It's 1 room. You'd still be living here, still have your own space, your own bathroom even. I don't understand why this has to be a whole thing. It has to be a whole thing, I said. Because you asked me to move out of the room your father died, having lived his whole adult life in beside me, and you asked it like you were requesting I switch seats on an airplane. That landed. I saw it land. For just a moment. Something like genuine shame crossed Tyler's face, the first sign in weeks that some part of him understood the actual weight of what he'd been asking. But it passed quickly, replaced by the particular defensiveness people reach for when they'd rather not sit with shame for very long. That's not fair, Mom. Dad's been gone 4 years. I'm not trying to erase him, I'm trying to take care of my own family. Can't you understand that? I do understand that, I said. I'm asking you to understand something too, that taking care of your family doesn't have to come directly out of what's left of mine. He left shortly after that, tense, without the usual kiss on the cheek. Ashley texted me the next morning, a message that read, in its entirety, "Hope we can figure this out soon. The nursery furniture is already on order and we don't want to have to store it, the furniture. Already ordered." Before I had said yes to anything at all. That was the moment. Not the Sunday dinner, not the paint swatches held against my bedroom wall, but that text message, so casually presumptuous, treating my consent as a formality that had simply not yet been administratively processed. That I stopped deliberating and started deciding. I called Pam Wynne back that same afternoon. "I think I'd like to talk seriously about listing," I told her. "What changed your mind?" she asked. I thought about how to answer that honestly. I think I finally understood that if I don't decide what happens to this house, someone else is going to decide it for me. And I'd rather be the one holding the pen. We scheduled the listing photography for the following week. I told no one, not Tyler, not Ashley, not even Diane at first. Though she found out within days, because Diane finds out everything eventually, and I have never been able to keep a secret from her for long. I did, however, do one more thing before the sign went in the yard. Something that mattered to me more than the paperwork itself. I walked through every room of that house alone, one evening after the photographer had already come and gone, and I said a private, unhurried goodbye to 28 years of my life. I stood in the kitchen where Ray burned toast every Sunday. I stood in the garage beside his pegboard of tools, still exactly as he'd left them. I sat on the edge of my bed, my actual bed, in my actual room, and I allowed myself, finally, to cry the tears I hadn't let myself cry at the dinner table 3 weeks earlier, and then I stood up, dried my face, and went to sleep, because I had a very early morning ahead of me, and a phone call to make before breakfast. Here is something I have learned at 60 years old about the moments that end up defining a life. They rarely announce themselves in advance. You do not wake up on the morning something irreversible happens with a sense of occasion. You wake up, most of the time, the way you wake up every other day, a little stiff, thinking about coffee, half listening to the birds outside the window. That is how I woke up on the morning I listed the house. It was a Thursday. Tyler and Ashley had a standing arrangement to stop by that Saturday to gynize the moving timeline. As Tyler had put it in a text the day before, a phrase that had made my jaw tighten every time I reread it. I had not yet told them what I'd decided. I had, in fact, decided quite deliberately not to tell them in advance, and I want to explain why, because I know that choice can look, from the outside, like I was trying to ambush my own son. I wasn't trying to ambush him. I was trying to protect myself from the very real possibility that if I told him in advance, he and Ashley would spend the intervening days working every possible angle. Guilt, negotiation, Ashley's pregnancy as leverage, promises about the future, to talk me out of a decision I had already, finally, made with a clear head. I had spent 3 weeks being talked into things gently and incrementally. I was not interested in spending a 4th week being talked out of the one thing I'd decided that actually protected me. So on that Thursday morning, before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee, Pam Wynne called to confirm the listing was live. I remember exactly where I was standing. At my kitchen counter, still in my robe, the sun just starting to properly come up over the rose bushes outside the window. "It's live," Margaret said, "and I have to tell you. I already have 2 agents reaching out about showings. This is going to move fast." "Good," I said, and I was surprised by how much I meant it. I hung up the phone and I sat down at my kitchen table with my coffee, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something settle in my chest that I can only describe as peace. Not happiness exactly. There was grief tangled up in it too, grief for the ordinary future I'd once assumed I'd have. Watching my grandchild grow up down the hall in the house Ray and I built our whole lives around. But underneath the grief was something sturdier. The particular relief of a person who has finally stopped waiting to be considered and started acting like someone whose considerations matter. I called Tyler around 9 that morning, not a text, a phone call, because some conversations deserve a voice, even an uncomfortable one. "Hey Mom, what's up?" he answered, breezy, clearly in the middle of his workday. "Tyler, I need to tell you something and I need you to let me finish before you respond." A pause. "Okay, I've decided not to move into the guest room. I've decided instead to sell the house." The silence on the other end of the line lasted long enough that I genuinely wondered if the call had dropped. "You what, Mom? What are you talking about?" "I listed the house this morning. It's already live. A realtor thinks it'll sell within 2 weeks, maybe sooner." "You can't just, Mom, we had a plan. The nursery furniture is already ordered. We're supposed to come by Saturday and finalize." "The Tyler," I said, and I kept my voice level, though it cost me something to do it. "I let 3 weeks go by while you and Ashley planned paint colors and ordered furniture for a room in my house that I had not agreed to give up. You told me it was just a room, and maybe, if I'd been asked to give up any other room, that might have even been true. But you asked me to give up the room I shared with your father for 30 years, and you asked it the way you'd ask someone to switch a restaurant reservation. I thought about it for 3 weeks. And I decided that at 60 years old, with your father gone and no one left in that house but me, I am allowed to decide what happens to the walls I'm still living inside of. So your answer is to just sell out from under us." Without even talking to us first. "I did talk to you. I told you I needed time. You responded by ordering a crib." He didn't have an answer for that, not right away. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Could picture him exactly. Standing in his office, one hand pressed to his forehead, the particular posture he'd had since he was a teenager, whenever a situation stopped going the way he'd assumed it would. "What are you even going to do?" he finally asked, quieter now. "Where are you going to live?" "I've already found a place, actually," I said, and this was true. Pam had shown me a lovely 2-bedroom condo 8 minutes from the library, with a small patio perfect for a few rose bushes of my own, and a second bedroom I fully intend to fill with a crib of my own choosing, on my own timeline. Whenever I'm invited to be part of my grandchild's life in a way that treats me as furniture rather than furniture. "I'll be fine, Tyler. I've been taking care of myself for 4 years. I'm not asking you to take care of me. I'm asking you to stop assuming you're entitled to what's mine simply because I'm getting older and you assumed I'd get quieter about it." "This feels like punishment," he said. "It's not punishment," I said, and I meant this completely. "It's the first boundary I've set with you in about 3 years, and I understand it feels big, because I let so many things go unaddressed for so long that a single boundary now looks enormous by comparison. But Tyler, I need you to hear this clearly, because I don't think I've said it clearly enough before. I love you. I am overjoyed about this baby. I want to be a real, present, joyful grandmother, but I am not going to earn a place in my grandchild's life by disappearing room by room, out of my own home. If you want me in your family's future, it has to be as someone whose needs matter too, not as someone who's expected to keep making room, literally and otherwise, until there's nothing left of her own life to occupy." There was a long silence. "I need to talk to Ashley," he finally said, and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a long while after that call, my coffee gone cold, my hands, I noticed, not shaking at all. Steadier, in fact, than they had been in weeks. By that evening, the first showing had already happened. By Saturday, the very day Tyler and Ashley had planned to come join and ice the moving timeline, I had 2 offers, both above asking price. Tyler and Ashley did not come by that Saturday. Tyler texted instead, a short message that read, "We need some space to process this. I don't understand why you couldn't have just talked to us like adults instead of blindsiding us." I read that message twice, and then I typed back the only response I had the energy and the honesty left to give. "I tried talking, Tyler. For 3 weeks, you ordered a crib. I hope one day you understand the difference between being blindsided and finally being heard." I did not hear from him again for 11 days. The house sold in 19 days to a young couple expecting their first child, a small, strange symmetry that I noticed and chose to find comforting rather than painful. I signed the closing paperwork at Pam's office on a bright Tuesday morning in May. And I cried in the parking lot afterward, briefly and without shame, for the version of my life that had ended in that house, and for the version of my life that was, somehow simultaneously, beginning. I moved into the condo the following week. It is smaller than the house on Larkspur Lane, but it is entirely, unambiguously mine. Every room, every wall, every decision about what goes where, made by me and answerable to no one. I planted 3 rose bushes on the small patio the first weekend I lived there, cuttings I'd taken, with Pam's blessing, from the bushes outside my old front walk, so that some living piece of that garden would carry forward into whatever came next. Tyler called me 11 days after the sale closed. His voice, when I answered, sounded younger than it had in a long time, not younger in a good way, but younger in the way people sound when they're finally being honest about something they've spent weeks being defensive about instead. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking a lot, and I owe you an apology, I think a real one. Not the kind where I explain why I wasn't wrong." I sat down at my new kitchen table, smaller than the old one but sturdy and mine, and I listened. Ashley and I talked about it, a lot, and I kept trying to explain it away, telling myself we weren't asking that much. It was just a room, you'd still have a home. But then Ashley said something that actually got through to me. She asked me how I'd feel if, when I was 60, someone I loved told me the room I shared with the person I built my whole life with was just a room that needed to be repurposed for someone else's convenience. And I couldn't even finish imagining it. It made me feel sick. And that's when I understood, really understood, not just intellectually but actually felt, what I'd asked you to do. I didn't say anything right away. I let him keep going, because I sensed he needed to get all the way through it without me softening the moment too early. "I think some part of me," he continued, "has been treating you like you were already less, since Dad died, I mean. Like your needs got smaller because your family got smaller. Like the house, the space, the say in things. All of it was just going to naturally flow toward whatever made the most sense for the growing part of the family. And you were supposed to just contract to make room, and I never once asked myself if that was fair. I just assumed it, the same way I think a lot of people assume things about their parents once they get older, and that's not okay. I'm sorry, Mom. Really sorry. Not because you sold the house. I understand now why you did that, and honestly I respect it, but because of what it took to get me to actually listen. I let myself feel that apology fully before I responded, because I have learned, this year more than any other year of my life, that an apology deserves to be received with the same care it takes to give one honestly. Thank you for saying that, I told him. All of it. I believe you mean it. Can I ask you something, he said. Are we going to be okay? Me and you, I mean. I don't want the baby to grow up not knowing their grandmother because of this. We're going to be okay, I said, and I meant it, though I was careful too. Not to promise more than I could honestly offer. But Tyler, I need you to understand, I'm not the same version of your mother who would have kept quietly making room for as long as you needed me to. I love you. I am so ready to love that baby with everything I have left in me, but I'm going to do it from a life that's fully mine, not from whatever square footage is left over after everyone else's needs get met first. I hope you can make room for that version of me too. I can, he said. I want to. I think I need to if I want to raise this kid to understand what real respect for family looks like, instead of just what convenience dressed up as family looks like. We talked for a long while after that, longer than we had in months, about small things and large things. The way families do when a wound has finally been named honestly enough to actually start healing instead of just scarring over. Epilogue 8 months later. My granddaughter, Ivy, was born on a warm morning in June, 6 pounds 4 ounces. With Ray's exact stubborn chin, which made me laugh out loud in the hospital hallway the first time I saw her. Tears streaming down my face for reasons that had nothing to do with sadness at all. She spends every other weekend at my condo now. I bought a proper crib for the second bedroom, not because anyone asked me to give up my space for it, but because I chose it, for a room that is fully mine to fill however I want, whenever I want. In a life that answers to no one else's timeline anymore.
Tyler and Ashley bought their own house eventually, a modest 3-bedroom about 20 minutes from my condo, purchased honestly, on their own terms, without borrowing space or dignity from anyone else to get there. Ashley and I are, if not close exactly, at least honest with each other now in a way we never quite managed before. She told me once, holding Ivy on my patio among the rose bushes, that she'd never really thought about what it meant to ask an older woman to shrink until she imagined someone asking the same of her one day. I told her I appreciated that more than she probably knew. I am 60 years old. I raised a son, built a home with a man I loved for 30 years, buried that man far too soon, and then, when someone tried to quietly resize my life to fit around everyone else's convenience, I found the courage to pick up a phone and make one decision, entirely my own, before breakfast. People sometimes ask me if I regret selling the house so fast, so decisively, without more warning. I tell them the truth. I regret waiting 3 weeks. I do not regret the decision itself for even a single morning. Because here is what I know now, in a way I didn't fully know before that Thursday morning with my coffee going cold on the counter. A room is never just a room. It is the last physical proof of a life you built, and you are allowed, at any age, to decide who gets to stand inside it and who has to ask first.